Welcome to the Technology Principle podcast, where the world's top technology leaders share their pivotal moments and breakthrough ideas that shape their journey. This is where the future of technology gets personal. Today, we're joined by Mairead McIlkenny, Senior Fintech and Technology Executive with more than 18 years' experience in leading global transformation. We'll explore her journey from early days through to navigating complexities of AI-enabled customer service, customer experience, and global regulatory shifts, and the fast evolving expectations of modern boards. If you're a leader navigating the crossroads of technology and regulation and human-centered transformation, this one's for you. Right. Hello.
Hi there.
I want to take you back to you as a child. What were you like?
When I look back, I suppose, childhood, I'm the youngest in a family of three siblings, myself the youngest, and an age gap, quite a significant age gap between my sister and my brother, so 8 and 9 years. So probably the annoying youngest child, always in their faces looking for them to play with me and take their time. But I think also what that meant for me was I had the opportunity to expand my music taste by them being older, get into nightclubs at an age when maybe I shouldn't have been, thanks to them. But also life became a lot easier for me because they pushed through some of the boundaries that would have been traditionally there as our first child. So in that regard, I suppose I've always been very blessed that I've been so close to the two of them and that they looked after me throughout that.
Fine. And at school, good student?
I think hardworking. Always felt that,
Very diplomatic.
I think so. I think, I always felt like if I did anything wrong, I was the one that was going to get caught. So I played on that line of just being safe. It was easier not to get into trouble. But also, I also learned very early days from, I suppose, my family and my cousins that if you worked hard, and my dad was a hard worker, my mum was a hard worker, that you could get to where you needed to get to. There was this belief. So school was a place where you worked hard, you put your best in the belief that, you could be anything you wanted to be.
So did you know what you wanted to be at that age, or were you just essentially working hard towards the next step of your sort of like growth in that sense?
I wanted to go to university.
Okay.
And that was definitely on the cards.
Okay.
And for two reasons. One, I felt there was a society available to me and a social life in university that I would really enjoy.
Yeah.
But secondly, that path, the community, the network that I would have being in that community, getting through college, getting the degree, would enable me to get that next big step in life and that role or that occupation or whatever that I was going to do. So it was a light at a tunnel that I always felt.
But that's really quite a mature way to look at it, because to understand the benefits of university in that sense, the community and the relationships before actually going to university it's a very mature way of looking at it.
I think I was blessed living in Galway as well, and that was a university town.
Fine.
So quite a bohemian city in the sense of during the winter time it was full of students.
Yeah.
In the summertime the tourists would come.
Okay.
So you could always see the sense of fun that was being had by students. So I think I was always in close proximity to the university and knowing that if I got to go there, I would enjoy it, and I certainly did.
Fine. Yeah. So you went to university. What degree did you do at uni?
I did business.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, Bachelor of Commerce, yeah.
So did you know at that time then where you wanted to go, what you wanted to be, what your profession wanted to be, or did you find it out at university?
So I was very lucky in secondary school or in second level school. We had a business teacher who would always look at us from the perspective of not just learning the curriculum, but always would bring in other references. Things like, the Time magazine or Business and Finance back then is a big publication as I was growing up. And her view always was if you can see the 360 of what, business and commerce looks like, then you can relate to it and you'll do better in the exam. And I loved the fact that business was about people. It was about providing a service or a product to an end customer and what that might look like. So there was definitely a fire in my belly at the thought of doing something in business. I didn't know what that would be. But I always thought, a general business degree was something that lined up very well to where I was happy, but also where I was doing very well. Like I was
Okay.
never a mathsy brain. I was always much more in the space of the people, the network, the community. And
Okay.
I think that stood to me when I went throughout my years in college, because with a commerce degree, you go in and you touch it every aspect of business. And then as you go on to your final years, you're starting to kind of finesse what are those routes.
Okay.
One area that I was able to work on was, legal and law. That was an element within that. So that gave me an opportunity to explore, similarly, human resources, similarly, marketing. So it was a great all rounder. And when I look back on it, I often think it just enabled me to get that general taste of everything for the number of years that I was there. Coming out having no clue what I was going to do, but certainly it did line up with, where my aspirations were, and I suppose what I was good at and what I enjoyed. So it lined up very well with me and where I was suited, I think, at that time.
So after uni, what was your sort of first, job in that sense?
So this was the interesting one. So back then, Galway, what was it? So on the west coast of Ireland, a lot of biotech
Yeah.
companies. So if I had done a science degree,
Yeah.
I would have had a natural step, most likely into one of these large multinationals like Pfizer
Yep.
and
Yep.
Boston Scientific in Galway. That wasn't the track that I had taken. And what I was familiar with as well, I suppose, is that, some of my friends in cohort were going on to do the postgrad and they were doing their masters. And I, at that time, felt I was very tired of having no money. I was very tired of being a poor student. And I also will never forget, saying to my mum, I've done my time here in Galway. I've had the opportunity to have a really good time living at home in Galway, going to college. I said to her, I think I'd like to explore and immigrate potentially somewhere else. So I immigrated to Dublin, the capital, along with many of my classmates. And I went into a retail postgraduate program with
Okay.
a company called Dunn Stores. And the reason I went for that postgraduate was I knew at that time, it's what I'd worked in shops, I'd worked in retail, I liked fashion, I liked clothes, and I thought, this looks like fun.
Yes.
I think I'll enjoy being a trainee manager on their graduate scheme.
Yes.
And I did that in Dublin and in the big smoke, as we would have called it back then, in the big city, with many of my college friends who had gone on to also do graduate programs in different places, some of them in the big five or the big four back then. So it was like an extension of college life,
Okay.
going to Dublin.
Okay.
Similar, as I said, community, network, having fun, but working hard. And then realizing as well, I'll never forget day one going in as a trainee graduate retail manager into the store in the middle of the heart of Dublin. And the store manager said to me, he goes, you may have a degree now, you may have done your few years in college, but you don't know business, you don't know people, you don't know our business. You're starting from the beginning. And he said, what I urge you to do is to spend time with the people on your team who are the permanent people, the people who've been here 5 years, 10 years and done stores, who really know this business, he says, because they will teach you how this business works. And that was a great foundational learning for me about how, one, you learn a business, but two, how important your people are. And I think that was the very first time in my career that I went, I'm not going to be successful unless my people are open to teaching me, open to helping me learn this business, and I'm there for them and helping them be successful in what they're doing every day. So I was with the price gun, pricing clothes, putting stuff in the hangers, doing all that, even though I was walking around as the manager, I certainly wasn't. And they were so good and kind to me throughout that program, helping me learn the business and understand, what it meant to be in the heart of retail. And retail is all about the customer. And you can't avoid your customer when you're in retail. So if they have a complaint, they're going to come up to you. They're facing off to you, telling you how unhappy they are. And I think that was the other key learning for me was, the customer obsession piece. If you do a good job by your customer, if you enable them to have the product or service, that they want, that they'll enjoy, they'll come back, there'll be repeat business. But when they're having a problem or an issue, being there for them, being empathetic, listening to them and trying to fix and resolve and work that through for them is so important as well. So it was a really strong learning ground for me where I suppose you could say I cut my teeth in the whole world of business. But what a great start into that. And I look back on those principles today and I go, they're still with me, right throughout.
It's your foundation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's the foundation, and
Yeah.
as it's not to sound cliches, but
Yeah.
the strongest buildings are built on the strongest foundations.
They are. Yeah.
So how talk me through, obviously, you went from working in the retail and you've been leading at some of the largest fintechs in the world. How did you go into that fintech world? How did you become that leader? And the third part to this question is, at what point did you know you wanted to be a leader?
I think when I look at the landscape in Dublin,
Hmm.
so Dublin City, if you look at the skyline along by the Liffey, and you see all the large multinational
Yeah.
corporations there. And it is a mirror, we used to often say, of Silicon Valley. It was California at the time really pushing tech,
Hmm.
but also being that hub in Dublin, we were able to bring in a lot of multinational talent as well into the centre. And I remember, when I evolved my career and I'd moved on from retail, I started working in finance function and learning accounting and trying my hand at accountancy for a while. And all the time, what I was always drawn to was these international types of businesses and trying to figure out how could I find my place there, because I always felt if I could get in the door, firstly, and my first break in the door was an accounting role with Panasonic, I'll never forget.
Okay.
And I was the accounts assistant.
Okay.
And then what happened was, here's a Japanese organization, they've international organization, really cool electronics products back then as well, and exciting. And again, it was, those products I could resonate
Yeah.
with. I could resonate with Technics or sound systems. I could
Yeah.
resonate with all of the electronic tellies and all the things that they did. But also what was happening was, in my little lowly job and as an accounts clerk, leaders were coming in from all around the world to the hub in Dublin, and they were having their meetings, and I was helping prepare reports and understanding about, if you have a good product line, this is what can happen. If you have good people, they stay with you. You can develop your people. And what happened for me was the opportunity was we were putting in a new stock inventory system. And I was the subject matter expert in the accounting
Okay.
function,
Okay.
not very technical at the time, steered away from computer science and developing code when I was doing my BCom. And all of a sudden, I'm the guru
Yeah.
on how we're going to do this. And the leap of faith, I suppose, that was given to me at the time by the leadership was, well, you know the accounting function, you know our stock, you know our inventory. We have consultants here who know all about the tech side of it.
Mm.
Let's together work on this. And I got the opportunity to see how it's done. And I think that was a big
Wow.
thing for me to go, I have a place in this team,
Mm.
but I can learn from others who are doing this all the time.
Okay.
And over time, what happened and what evolved was the belief that maybe I could eventually get out of the mundane month end closes and the year
Mm.
end
Mm-hmm.
closes that were coming.
Mm.
And maybe I could become a project manager, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I would be the one leading up the project and having the meetings and
Mm.
calling everybody, to the agenda points. And what enabled me to do that was the belief that my leaders had in me that gave me the chance, that gave
Mm.
me the opportunity. And what evolved from that, I suppose, was the belief that, you could do it, but there was people around you supporting you as well.
Mm.
And when I'd see others on those project teams who needed the opportunity, or a domain expert somewhere that maybe didn't have maybe the courage or the self-belief to be part of that project, I would call them out and go, maybe you have a go, I'll help you.
Okay.
And I think that was the culture that sort of enabled me eventually to go, I am leading teams. It wasn't a deliberate point of, I'm going to be the boss. And I think
Yeah.
that was the learning I had in Dunn Stores. It was like, you can walk in and you can have the suit on and you can have the clipboard in your hand, but you're not the boss. You're not the leader
Yeah.
unless people want to follow you.
Yeah.
And I think that was the piece that I really learned with Panasonic initially, with other multinationals as I
Yeah.
evolved in there, was if you can bring people with you, if you have leaders around you who will encourage you, develop you, push you, put you into places as well where you might be out of your comfort zone, but enable you to fail quickly and pivot and
Yeah.
course correct, then you'll learn, you'll get better at it, and you can bring people with you. So I think that was how I sort of got to that point where all of a sudden my career was with international companies like Yahoo. In Dublin, we got the opportunity. It was originally Overture, which was a
Okay.
search service company. We joined to help set up a shared service centre in Dublin at the
Okay.
time for Overture. And within about 3 months of having the job, we were called into the boardroom and told, you've been bought out by Yahoo. And at
Okay.
that stage, we were like, okay, this means our jobs are gone.
Yeah.
What does this mean? All of these people we've hired, how do we ensure we protect those roles? And the only way we could do it was to get together and say, let's showcase, let's be best in class, let's encourage Yahoo to put their activities into Dublin to enable us to be their shared service centre. And that's what we successfully did. And all of a sudden, I'm on a plane going to Pasadena and I'm training cohorts of people who are working in the hub in Dublin and how to do the customer support and how to do the accounts functions. And then we were in San Jose and in California, bringing those activities back into Dublin as well. And that suddenly there was a pride. We were the team who were seen as being trusted, enabled to do that. And we were providing career pathing and growth and opportunities for people in the team in Ireland. And that evolved when I then moved to PayPal as well. We got the opportunity I was approached to go and do this again.
Yes.
I was 8 years in Yahoo and they knocked at the door and said, would you like to come over here to us in PayPal? And I thought, no, I'm fine here. I just had my twin girls at the time. I was just back from maternity leave and I thought, no, I'm good. I'll settle in here.
Yeah.
I don't want this disruption. And my husband at the time, he said, go for it. He goes, you're going to love it. Do it. And I said, you sure? I said, what if I have to be on a plane and I'm not around? He said, you're on a plane anyway. So he said, I have your back. Let's go do it. And that's how the journey evolved into PayPal. And 8 years, I think nearly 10 years after I'd moved into PayPal, like looking back at the growth, numerous sites around Ireland, numerous sites around Europe, having an international role. And again, it was always down to just, mentors and leaders around me who were giving me that opportunity, but also me having people around me who I was given the opportunity to. And they never let me down. We learned together. And I think that was the other piece on it. So I would never have thought going back in the day, in Galway, when I was looking at putting out my colleges and where I was going to go in the courses, that, I'd be sitting in San Jose in a boardroom and there'd be people there from all around the world and me in the middle of them. As I'd say to my mum, me from Galway, here in the middle of all of these. And in some cases, the only woman in the room as well. But it's, I never thought that would be where it would have.
Was there like not a pinch me moment, like wow, what I've done is where I've come from in terms of from Galway to Dublin and, working in retail and having that conversation with that person. I'm now in California. I'm now leading people. Was there a pinch me moment in that sense?
I think there is the pinch me that always would resonate for me. Like my dad died when I was quite young. I was 11 and Mum was an amazing woman and that she really doubled down and enabled us to, all my siblings to be the best that we could be. She always said that I have your back. I think the pinch me for me was if she could see me now and, Mum's still around and she sees me and, she laughs sometimes because she'd say, Mairead, you're so stubborn and you're so determined. God help the teams having to deal with you. And, she feels sorry for them sometimes because she goes, you can be so focused, because she knows me so well. And I laugh with her in those moments and I say, so is she. So I got it from her. I got that determination from her as well. But I think that is the pinch to me that says, I think through the support systems that I've always had, I've been enabled to take and embrace the opportunities that were put in front of me. And I think if I hadn't had that, whether it was my mum, my husband, my daughters, really good mentors and bosses who kind of, pushed me out of my comfort zone, as I said, and also reminded me of what was important, like your people, your customer, those things don't change. No matter what role you're in or what company or industry you're in, no matter where in the world you're sitting, in any boardroom, they're still really important. And I think that's the pinch me that goes, it's back to core roots. I think that always is what grounds me.
So your leadership and your career has always been around the person or people, whether being you enabling them or them enabling you. And obviously PayPal and beyond now. Within the tech world, how has that changed? And in the sense of with our AI coming in, and has that hindered that approach or is that added to that approach?
I think when I talk a lot about AI and I have been for years. Like you can imagine, we joke, my community in Yahoo, we joke, that, we were doing AI before anybody else was. And we used to talk about the algorithm and what would be returned as a result of the algo playing up. So AI has been around a long, long time. Technology has been around a long, long time. But I think the basic fundamental that hasn't changed and still doesn't change, and even today, and I look at the assignments I'm on with clients, is that you can put in place as much technology or an investment in AI as you want, but if your people are not on the journey with you and you're not helping them on that to be able to embrace it, to train them, to invest in them, then you're going to have a lot of technology and a lot of investment that's not doing the best that it needs to be. And it's similarly, I think, with your customers and your cohort and demographic of customer base. Similarly, if you're not meeting your customers where they want to be met,
Yes.
and you're not leveraging the technology and the AI around you to be able to meet them where they want to be met, whether that's digital experiences or in some cases, we do have white glove services for clients where, they do want to pick up the phone and they do want to have the conversation, and there's cultures where they really enjoy that. So I think it's really understanding, and the segmentation piece being, where is my employee or my team member right now in this? How proficient are they in the AI tools I've made available to them? Are they on the journey of where the business is going and the strategy? Have I taken the time to really explain to them what this means for them? Have I explained to them about what their career path now looks like? Because the fear piece is, well, AI is going to come and take my job. Technology was going to come and take our jobs in the 90s. So, how do you ensure that people don't feel left behind? And then I think the other piece of it is to the customer piece. We have demographics of clients across lots of different industries who may be at that stage where they might be a little bit afraid of AI. They might be a little bit afraid of the automation. They may not trust necessarily providing data into platforms. They may not be at that point. And I think, again, it's about understanding, where is your client at and how do you want to segregate and differentiate that service to them so that they feel that they can belong to your service and your product, and that your product's going to meet them where they want to be met. And I think that is the core piece, where the tech, I'm so excited about new and shiny. I love it. Like, I love talking to the technologists about what's coming through next and meeting vendors and talking to them about, like, where's the roadmap going and where are you investing in and how best can we reiterate. But I'm always, I think, that voice in the room too that goes, what does this mean for the customer? What does this mean for the people? Because that ultimately, as I said earlier, Simon, it doesn't change no matter where we are in that. And I think it's about really understanding how we can bring people along with that evolution.
It's so the opportunity of AI within your world.
Yeah,
the sky's the limit.
it is.
But I want to pick up one thing, a couple of things you said there about the customer people and how they are not the consequence of AI, because there's not consequence can be seen as a negative word. Actually, it can be a positive word as well. We were speaking off camera earlier about the future of AI in terms of employment and people and leadership. So how do you lead people via the adoption of AI? So what I mean by this is that you have a lot of people and you're doing transformation projects and you're bringing in new tech, new transformation, new AI in that sense. But ultimately, you want people to adopt it, work with it, but have that human connection. Is that a challenge now these days?
We talk recently. I was having conversations with some of the teams about, we're putting in place a lot of investment, a lot of new platforms, a lot of automation. And one of the key points highlighted by the team was that human connection. So, I used to, be on Microsoft Teams talking to my buddy in the back office to get an answer. And all of a sudden we put in a ticketing system. And, it was a very valid point. They said, I'm now, my connection is now behind a wall. I now have to wait for the service level. I now have to, wait. I don't necessarily know who has that issue right now. And I've been told not to connect. And it's a real day problem for us that we continue to think about, and we need to continue to think about, how do you retain that connection and the relationship, because that is the secret sauce of so many industries, so many businesses that, you can go to and you can find out. And I think the piece that we sometimes forget about with technology is goodwill. So we make connections and we make relationships throughout the course of our times in companies. The longer you're in a company, and I remember having done my extended tenure in a number of organizations, I knew who to go to. And we talked a little earlier about, the process, and there's a process to follow, but then there's the fact that you can pick up the phone to somebody or you can message them. And I think that's something that we have to be really mindful that we don't embrace the automation, the investment in AI so much in a way that loses out on the fact that there needs to be goodwill. There needs to be a culture where people will go the extra mile for their colleagues. But also what you need to keep really at the heart of that too is, back to the customer obsession too. Why am I here? Why am I being paid to do a job any day of the week? Who pays the wages? Who pays the bills coming in? It's my customer. And some customers, they may want to be, as we talked earlier about, serviced in particular ways. They may not want to have to pick up a phone or send an email. They may want to just use the product and get on with their lives. I'm one of those types of customers. If I have to ring a utility company or a bank, it's the last thing I want to do because I'm busy. And the fact that like even the idea of having to dial a number, I'm going to have to find a quiet place in my busy day
Yeah.
and have the conversation and be on hold for quite some time. So it's pretty dire and grave if I have to go and pick up the phone. And I think that's where we have to leverage the automation, leverage the data, leverage the insights that we have as a result of these investments, and do a better job in meeting the customer where they want to be met. And I think that is the real key to it. And then we have the secret sauce. So it means you still have the relationship, you still will have all of that and the goodwill across colleagues, but you're mindful too that you have to
Fine.
be there in a human connection
Yeah.
piece too.
It
for
makes
them.
sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. And was this a challenge in PayPal, or has that become more of a challenge since then in that respect? Because obviously AI is developing at such a great
Yeah.
rate at the moment. So you're now at IG.
Mhm.
Do you think that challenge is an ever present, or do you think actually it's it has been here for the past 3 or 4 years, and actually it will be beyond in the next 3 or 4 years? This is where it's going to happen.
I think I think it's, as I said earlier, like
Yeah.
it's AI has been around, the
Yeah.
automation, the
Yeah.
technology is it constantly evolving.
Yeah.
When I look at new product and new tech that I'm putting into any client site right now, we kind of have a mantra that says, don't sign up for too long a time.
Fun.
Like years
Yep.
ago,
Yep.
you
Yep.
had 3-year implementations for
Yep.
CRMs. Now we're going, do it in 6 months. Why can't you do it in
Wow.
6 months? Why can't
Okay.
you do it in 3? Let's
Yeah.
get a POC in a week. So the pace at which we're operating is much faster. I think also what we're being enabled to do is to fail fast in certain cases, where you can pivot quickly and resources and the tech is agile enough to get you back on track and get you back on course quickly, which means you can bring product to market, which means you can differentiate to market quicker and faster. And I think that pace will continue. But when I look back in the last couple of years, I would have never thought, in some of those rooms where there was companies looking at like 3 and 5 year programs. And, one of my most recent organizations, we did a lot of work with issuer companies, with banks and
Okay.
fintech. And, some of these traditional banks, they were stuck in this legacy of how do we get to that next stage of our evolution? How
Yeah.
do we, compete with the disruptors? And how do we
Yeah.
really, not just only get out ahead, but how do we even meet them
Yeah.
in this market right now, knowing how much they've changed consumer behavior and the commercial behavior as well. And what they've had to acknowledge is you can't have long programs, and all the time when I'd be talking to those clients, the one thing that they'd be really mindful and would ask the question is, how long is the implementation? Because they don't have time. And I think that is the differentiator now. I think it's the speed to market, the speed of getting tech there, the speed of embracing, but also not tying yourself in too much to what will become legacy tech or tech debt quicker than it ever was before. And I think that's just something that, I'm always very mindful when I'm looking at what's coming ahead at us. We
Okay.
don't know what's going to be
Yeah.
down the
Yeah.
track in
Yeah.
10 years' time, but I certainly wouldn't want to be stuck with the tech I have right now and trying to get out of that, which is what a lot of my banks who were clients in, one of my previous companies, that was where they were. They were trying to unpick, they had resources that, some of the skills were now, getting to a point where their demographic of employee was retiring and they're
Yeah.
going, what do I do now? Like that
Yeah.
coding skill I can't get. So I think that's something that I'm always very mindful of, the future-proof piece. How do you stay agile enough to be able to adapt and to be able to, face that head on as it evolves.
And that must be an ongoing process for you as
Yeah.
an individual.
It is.
And it's interesting how people view tech is probably a representation of society.
Yeah.
Very quick, we want it now, impatience in that sense. And what came first, the tech or the society? I mean, that's a conversation we can have another day. I wanted to focus on, and obviously your leadership. You've done a lot within the fintech world, and you've mentioned some key words during our conversation. People thought your mother said you were stubborn, you were determined, and you like to create goodwill. Goodwill was a key word. So away from your professional career, tell me about yourself. What to add value as a leader, what brings value in that sense away from your professional career.
So when you're in an international role, right, it's 24/7. Like without a doubt, you're all on, and it's all consuming for both yourself, like for me personally, and for my entire family as well. Like so my children grew up knowing all the C-suite leaders and bosses in PayPal, both by first name and having met them. Like they were in our house, we were in their houses. Like the community was unreal, and the conversations over the dinner table, were such and such did this today and whatever, and they knew them and they grew up with them. And that's what it becomes, I think, when you get so entrenched in organizations, and really good organizations and good cultures. Like they're excited for you, they look after you. Of course, it's the job that has to be done at the end of the day, but there is that family of connection and community that you
Yeah.
have. So that was the first thing. And I think, the second piece for me, which I've noticed most recently in my career, I'm getting a little bit more time back in a sense. Not because I suppose I've not had that before, but my children are at a different stage. So my girls are now, hopefully going into college next year. So there's less of that full on all the
Yeah.
time and more of the being present, being available and having conversations. And what it's enabled me to do is to think about, how do I give back?
Okay.
So giving back, a lot of my career has been, to my family, to my
Yep.
team, to the company. But now it's been, particularly in the last 2 years, more about how do I give back to I suppose the industry a
Yes.
little bit more too.
Yes.
And I'm one of these people, when I go on holidays and I'm still on LinkedIn, I'm still reading, I'm still listening to the podcast. I'm
Yeah.
a curious soul.
Yeah.
Like, I love to learn. I love to know what's
Yeah.
going on. I'm a bit nosy. I just, who's doing that? What company's
Yeah.
doing that? What
Yeah.
are they doing?
Yeah.
How can I do that? How
Yeah.
can I not do that? So for me, the real opportunity most recently, and it's a network I've been involved with for many, many years, but the Institute of Directors in Ireland and most recently in the United Kingdom, they're a community of mentors, supporters, and people who give back. The philanthropy is just unbelievable from the perspective of the time that they give. And what I've been able to do is to start to build out my board portfolio.
Okay.
And most recently, I've been appointed to the Money Advisory Bureau Services in
Okay.
Ireland, which is a board that essentially what the whole mission is about meeting the community at the point where they may be in financial challenge or strife and being available to them at those darkest times. And for me, giving back, I suppose, having spent so many years in the industry in fintech, has been like, I was the one leading and delivering buy now, pay later. I was the one identifying opportunities in credit products. I was the one celebrating when we were hitting those numbers and
Yeah.
credit lines and all of that. It's now very grounding and very rewarding to be able to bring my experience and my industry background into that boardroom and having those conversations about how we can make a difference, lobbying the banks, lobbying the regulators to be more, I suppose, aware and supportive of the community and the products that we've been
Yeah.
launching. And that's something that I'd like to think I'll continue to do, is leveraging and getting the match between the experience, the impact that I make every day in work, and then being able to look at opportunity within the community to be able to use that experience to make a difference.
So I suspect that, well, I suspect it sounds like you've learnt a lot during this 2 years of mentoring yourself, and you've gained
Yeah,
a lot and taken it into your
Yeah.
back into your professional career.
absolutely.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
amazing. That's
It is
amazing.
really sweet. And I think, we had a staff day before Christmas of the MABS team, and,
Okay.
we heard their stories, and like, it is heartbreaking. And I remember even as well, like, organization I worked for, as I mentioned, like, we supported and our clients were issuing banks, and, doing the side by sides with them where they were listening to how their customers were being supported in some of these very vulnerable, very challenging situations, and realizing that the process and the rigor that they'd put around their products was hindering people to be able to go out and actually pay their electricity bill, to be able to feed their families, to be able to get out of that dark space that they'd created because they'd enabled lines of credit in a way that they shouldn't have had. And I think that's the piece, that there is definitely a social responsibility to us as well in industry and in fintech particularly, that we're mindful of how we protect the most vulnerable in those cohorts of clients as well, and that we're not just reacting when they come to us, but that we're spotting those behaviours early on in the cycle and actually taking the right correction course to do that. I think, acts like Consumer Duty in the UK are so important to protect the consumer, but also what they're doing is shining a light as well on organisations to ensure that they're held accountable. I think the more we do in that space as well, I think the more we will keep and ensure that we've got, the right side of the community getting the most from these products, of course, because it is also about,
Yeah.
social and financial democracy and enabling our society to be able to, avail of these amazing financial products. But at the other side of that, the education piece, the financial literacy is so important to go, like, has anyone ever sat us down? Like, I remember I went back to school, my business teacher was really good explaining, like, if you get a line of credit or you have a checkbook, like, there has to be money in the account. So many of the generation now in this digital world where they're given credit immediately, as I mentioned, the buy now, pay later and other types of offerings like that, they haven't necessarily been taught in school that that has to be paid back at some point. Like, at some stage, it's on loan.
Mm.
And, we often think back, I remember like there used to be the money lenders used to go around to the doors, and I was growing up in Galway City, and, if people were in difficulty to meet their bills, the money lender would come to the door, and of course at a very high rate of
Yes.
interest. And my family, luckily, we were never in that
Yeah.
situation. Mum was always very mindful that, you pay what you can afford.
Yeah.
You don't buy it unless you can afford it. But it is a similar model that we have right now. It's just, I think, disguised in a way that's on your phone, that's available to you now. The vetting is done immediately, and you've got the product, and you've got, you touched on it earlier, the immediate gratification. I've got it now.
Yeah.
You might not be able to afford it. You might never be able to afford it, but I've got it now, and then I move on. And then suddenly that knock comes to the door, the email comes in, or you're handed off to a debt collection company, and then life becomes very difficult and your rating's impacted. And I don't think our community realise, particularly some of the younger cohorts realise that, if you get a credit rating that's not in your favour, it can take many, many years. It shows up in your, when you're looking for a job and your reference checks, it shows up right across the board. And I don't think we're really as transparent as we should be when we provide those lines of opportunity in the financial side to individuals.
When you speak about this subject, again, going back to the word determination, I can really sense the determination of you to try and fix this problem. It really oozes from yourself. I just want I want to finish on this question. You've had so much experience in the fintech world, from starting up from university to going to retail and going into the fintech. If you could turn back time and go back and talk to yourself, whether just before uni or uni, what piece of advice would you give a younger self?
It's the old one, we talk a lot about that voice in your head, and guys have it too. I know we often say, and like for me, a lot of pushing through some of that glass ceiling in my industries, where as I said I was the only woman in the room, sometimes was the fact that I had like male mentors and supporters and advocates for me going, you go in there, you do it. But I think that voice in the head sometimes that can question, am I able to do this? Can I really do this? I don't know X, Y, and Z about this particular topic. When I was given the opportunity to work in PayPal, at that time they were owned by eBay. And I was most excited by eBay because it was marketplaces, it was goods, it was very similar to Yahoo. And I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. And I thought payments were kind of boring. I really did. I thought, oh, that's money. Like that's banking. That's not very exciting.
Yeah.
And what evolved for me very quickly going in there was the two types of customers that we had. So one was the consumer who was sending money, who was paying for goods and services, who was being, sometimes we're getting into fraudulent situations where they were paying for goods. And we had a really nice consumer protection, buyer protection policy that I'll never forget. I used it for my Airbnb holidays. If you pay by PayPal and you pay by, through Airbnb, you got double protection. So if there was no property at the end of that and you turned up on holiday with your family, you had the protection to get your money back. Very important. But that was one thing that I often thought, where we had outages in the platform or we had issues with our experiences for our consumers, there was a knock-on effect to them. It was their money at the end of the day. And then the other side of that coin was our sellers, because they had businesses that were reliant on us. And if they weren't able to sell their products, if our gateway and our, the PayPal gateway was down, well, then they were going to either lose the sale, or we were going to lose the sale, and they were going to go to the next payment rail opportunity on that platform. So that money was gone immediately. And that's their livelihood. And then I got the opportunity to meet them. And they used to say in the States, the mom and pop shops, but they were, these are small businesses sometimes who really reliant on this. And all of a sudden you're realizing that your duty of care is massive, and your responsibility to the consumers and to your sellers and your merchants as well, and the enterprise or accounts is so huge. What you have in some of those organizations is a culture where when something goes wrong, it's all hands on deck. And everybody comes together. It could be the weekend, it could be a Sunday morning, but they're going, there's somebody in trouble here. Let's fix it. Let's get on a call. Let's get on a bridge. And my phone would go and we jump on those bridges. And that's where I think I got that real fire in my belly around payments and fintech. I thought, this stuff matters. This stuff really, really matters. And even like my current client, when I look at, what I'm doing with that organization, it is very much around a cohort of customers who, they're taking their savings, they're taking their retirements, they're taking their pensions, and they're trusting our platform to enable them to create a different future, for them and their families. And And we have a duty of care to make sure that the platform stays up, that when they want to make their trades and deals, that it goes through for them. And if that's all we worry about and that's all that keeps us up all day and all night, we will do a great job and we'll do right by our clients. And I think
Absolutely.
that was the piece that I thought, yeah, money and payments is kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of quite a
Yeah.
cool industry, you know.
So you are essentially very much focused on the people.
Yeah.
Not just around you, not just in your personal life, but the people that your customers, your employees, and the goodwill you mentioned. It's generated by your leadership and them enabling you to be led by them, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that sums it up.